Yeah.
Welcome to the Primal Collective. We are kicking off with our first interview with Kristen Orts. She is a certified nurse midwife, a family nurse practitioner, and has her IBCLC, so she's also a lactation consultant.
Yes.
Amazing.
Thanks.
We are so excited to have you.
Thank you. This is really awesome. I'm super happy to be invited to this, so thanks.
Yeah, well, and thank you for being our very first. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got into your line of work?
Sure, yeah. When I was 19 years old, actually, I was going to be a pre-med. I wanted to be a naturopathic physician. I don't know, something just didn't feel right to me while I was going to pre-med classes. And so I started exploring all of my options as far as like schooling goes. And I stumbled across midwifery in that process. And I realized it was sort of the perfect marriage of all the things that I was interested in. So I was interested in women's studies. I was also interested in the natural medicine things. And so it just kind of was the perfect fit and perfect marriage of all the stuff I was into. The more I got into learning about midwives, I realized that babies could be born out of the hospital, which I had no idea was a thing, especially being 19 years old. And so I just thought to myself, wow, like what an empowering experience it must be for women to be able to be home or at a birth center having their babies. And so I got really excited about being somebody out in the world able to offer that option to people. So that's how I started getting interested in that, switched my major to nursing. There's actually several types of midwives around the United States. The one that I am is a certified nurse midwife, and certified nurse midwives, it was interesting to me to become that because there's different licensure laws in New York State and other states. Depending on what type of a midwife you are, you can either have an open door to practice in the hospital or closed doors to be in the hospital. So I just wanted to be able to have the opportunity to do whatever, whether it was going to be in or out of the hospital. So I didn't really have doors closed to me as far as a career goes, but I always knew that one day I would be out of the hospital. That was always the goal. Yeah, so I got my nursing degree. I started working as a nurse. I worked as a nurse for like 8 years or so, and that's when I became a lactation consultant at that time. I used to teach breastfeeding classes, which was super fun. I really
so cool.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. It was really nice to be able to teach expectant
Did you teach
families.
in the hospital?
Yeah, basically. So anybody who was planning to have a birth at the hospital that I worked at, which actually was Bassett and Cooperstown, and I had a great experience.
Very
I
cool.
loved it there. It was a great place to be a new nurse, But yeah, so I really liked it. It was like a 2-hour class that I would teach once or twice a month, I think it was. And it was just really nice getting to meet families and, talk about breastfeeding. And I was super passionate about it. And there were a bunch of us lactation consultants that worked at Bassett. And so it was just a really natural piece of thing to add into what I was doing in the hospital. And it was really fun and I liked it a lot. So I was there for about 8 years and finally decided to go back to midwifery school. Like I said, it was always my goal, but I really liked being a nurse so much. I kind of hung out there a little longer than I thought I would. But yeah, so then I left Bassett in 2016 and finished up midwifery school. When I became a midwife, I started working at St. Joe's, and I worked with Syracuse midwives. We were attending births at St. Joe's. This was before COVID, so they still had their in-hospital birth center open. So it was a really great place. Also, again, as a new midwife, to be able to doing births there, it was really, really awesome experience there too.
Yeah.
But yeah, so while I was being a midwife, I also seeing clients in the office, I saw how many people don't have access to a primary care office and how what kind of a provider shortage there actually was out there in the world for people who need a place to take their kiddos or themselves or their husbands, and young people just really aren't pursuing looking into their health. And so I thought, well, I'm going to go back to school and become a nurse practitioner. So I added that on, and that took a few years. Yeah. So then I practiced as a nurse practitioner for a few years. And in 2023, September it was, I started my own practice and started doing home births and offering a little bit of primary care for families who are interested in that. But midwifery is like my heart and soul. So that's like probably the main bulk of what I do, and a little bit of nurse practitioner stuff too.
Wonderful.
Yeah, so there we are.
Yeah, that sounds like a really empowering journey, and you were able to see a lot of different, aspects of the healthcare industry and a lot of different scenes, really. Like
absolutely.
You were, the role of the nurse and a traditional nurse, lactation consultant. Eventually, the evolution brought you to home births, which is incredible.
Yeah, finally here. It was a long journey, but every step I feel like was necessary, and really, obviously, as all of our journeys do, influence who we are today. And even the nurse practitioner piece, I got a really intense look at like our healthcare system and places where we could improve some things, and how, you know, insurance can be tricky, and navigating like health literacy for families to understand like what their options are, or even just how to like pay a bill. Like, you know, there's so many things that is really difficult to navigate. And so I got to see such a wide range of things, and that was a really great experience as well.
Yeah, it sounds like it opened your eyes to potentially flaws in the healthcare system, but also areas where you can help empower families.
Exactly.
Which is really cool. It sounds like a big part of your mission.
Yes, absolutely. I was just going to say that's really like kind of what I sort of was always looking to do. And I feel like that really helped me be able to be better at it. So,
which makes complete sense. And I mean, all the people that you've worked with who we know through our practice and personally just have nothing but positive things to say about their experience with you.
Same to you.
It's good to find someone who really cares about the individual.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
And caters everything towards them. Yeah,
right? Yeah, that's absolutely why
it's your mission.
It is.
Which brings us to kind of unique perspectives you may have on supporting families, or anything you've learned through the journey that you've gone through.
Yeah. So probably the number one reason why, like probably the number one thing I'm passionate most about doing this is people having the opportunity to choose whatever options that they think are best for their family, but to also be able to support people to make those choices, but allowing them to be the final determinant of what that choice looks like for them. So I really feel strongly that practitioners, it's our job to relay the information and evidence-based information.
Absolutely.
And talk about, you know, the pros and cons of each choice that a family has before them, but allowing them to accept the consequences of those choices, but also be happier about the, you know, benefits of whatever choice they might, you know, accept, and giving them the tools to empower themselves to make those choices. So that's really what I'm super passionate about, I would say.
Yeah, that's incredible. And it just gives them the autonomy, because I know a lot of times, sometimes things get cloudy because we let our own personal opinions affect the care we're giving people.
Yeah. If you have a client, if you ever talk to, that's like, well, what would you do? And I straight up tell them, I'm not telling you. Because I don't want that to impact like what choice they have. And sometimes it's almost easier for someone to be like, this is what you should do. But in the end, I think it's really the best choice for people to be the ones who are making that decision. And, you know, again, me providing the information, here's the pros and cons, you know, really can kind of help narrow that down for people. And I feel like that's my job, is to narrow it down. But also, I don't want something that I think or feel to really color what they are doing. They should be the ones who are making that choice.
Yeah, absolutely. And then they feel empowered. And like you said, whether it goes in a positive direction or it pivots and, you know, other things have to happen, it was their choice and they're comfortable with either side.
Yes, absolutely. Yep.
Which is wonderful. I know I'm terrible. I literally have not memorized the questions.
Yeah. Well, how could you?
X this out. So as far as moving kind of more towards home birth, what are some concerns generally that you hear from expectant parents who are considering home birth and potentially interviewing with you or want to learn more?
Well, one of the best things I think for families who are unsure about, do I want a hospital birth or a home birth, you know, might be to actually start with a hospital practice. That sounds crazy for me to say, but a lot of people are young and healthy and have never really had experiences with the healthcare system. And so sometimes it's hard to know, you know, what exactly am I saying yes or no to if you haven't had that experience. But I will say that there are many clients who have an appointment or two in the, you know, mainstream hospital-based, you know, birth settings that end up deciding they want, after a consultation with me, they get to meet me and talk about, you know, what they actually are looking for in their birth. And sometimes they realize that by going to the hospital, they might not be able to get the whole entire thing that they're looking for. You know, and hospitals, you know, it is, you know, healthcare for the masses. And so it's the way our healthcare system is set up is it's really difficult to individualize care for, you know, practices that are doing like 50 births a month, you know, to give each person the little thing that they want. They just don't have the time to do that because our healthcare system, it's like you have 5-10 minute appointments with your provider, you know, so some of those things are barriers to hospital practitioners to be able to give, you know, an individualized experience. When you have a small practice such as mine, I do have that luxury of being able to spend, 30 minutes to 60 minutes appointments with people, and that sort of thing. So it's just a very different experience. And I think that's what people, a lot of times who come to home birth, are looking for. Families, practitioners, whether hospital or home-based, we all want the same thing. We all want a healthy mom. We want a healthy baby. But the way we come about it is just different. But the piece that might be missing, I think, for some people who end up going away from a hospital setting and choosing a home birth is that they're not just looking for a safe medical experience. They're also looking for birth as a rite of passage. And they're looking for like that whole package of an empowering experience where they were very autonomous and they got to make the choices that they felt really good about, to know their provider really well. So there's a lot of that, I think, that goes into the decision making. And I think that's also, again, something that I'm very passionate about, is being able to provide, a space for people to not just get safe medical care, but also get, the rite of passage piece.
Yeah, absolutely. There's been a lot of talk about like the motherhood transition and physiological birth, where, in a space where you feel safe, both in the medical sense and in just environmental sense, because obviously birth is a very vulnerable time. So a woman's body, they have to feel safe in order for, physiological birth to take place. So it seems like a lot of, like what you're saying, is that it allows them that space and that, medical safety in that aspect to be able to experience birth as that transition, because it is it's a pivotal change in your life, in your family's life.
Absolutely. It's so huge. And women can come away from their birth experience feeling very empowered, or sometimes we're now seeing things such as, a PTSD experience, where it can be a stressful experience that women have to like navigate afterwards and have a baby. And there's a lot happening, again, physiologically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, for families as soon as a baby is born. And, so that's something that, I think is a really important piece of the decision making of where you decide to have your baby, is what exactly are you looking for, and realizing that you have options to look through, to sort, to, pick which thing makes the most sense for you. I think a barrier, as far as like trends go, is the narrative in the United States is that birth is extremely unsafe and scary. And I think that is probably, for families who are looking for a home birth or exploring like, should we, shouldn't we, that's probably the number one thing. And it makes sense. Of course, everybody wants to feel safe and whatnot, like you were saying, how important that is. And that's something that comes up the most, is me trying to and just provide information about actually, here's some statistics about home birth that show how safe home birth actually is. For example, in the Netherlands, 1/3 of all of their babies are born at home.
That's so cool.
And home birth in many other countries is a fully integrated option into the mainstream healthcare system in other cultures. In the United States here, it's just not that like that. The narrative here, like I said, culturally, is that we think birth is scary and unsafe. When you look at the statistics, they don't support that narrative at all. And so we're just a little slow sometimes to transition to some of the evidence that we come across. It's hard to change culture, and so I'm, again, happy to be kind of a person out there that's sort of trying to practice by the evidence and those sorts of things.
You're like bridging the gap.
Trying to.
So there's definitely a lot of families and people we've spoken to who, one, don't even know home birth is an option.
Totally.
And two, like you said, it's that fear mindset around it. And once they do actually look into the statistics and everything, it's amazing how you're like, oh, wow, actually, if you are a healthy individual, the statistics support a home birth.
Exactly. Yeah. Some of the favorite, statistics and things that I like to mention during consult is that, there's a research study from 2019 with 500,000 planned home births, and they showed that distance to the hospital did not make home birth less safe. Something unforeseen happening to mom or baby was not a factor making home birth less safe. The number one thing that made home birth less safe was when it wasn't fully integrated into the healthcare system. So that made it difficult for families who were at home to get into a hospital setting if they actually needed one.
And needed that immediate care.
Yes, yeah. Okay. So that was actually like the transfer, from a home to a hospital during labor sometimes needs to happen quickly. And if there were barriers in that process because we're out of the healthcare system doing a home birth and trying to get into the healthcare system, sometimes was a little tricky to navigate. Luckily, it's not like that all over the place in the United States, like New York, especially Syracuse. it's much better in some places than others. So I'm fortunate that that's a pretty, a relatively smooth transition here as compared to like some other states that have a little bit more barriers. But that is a thing. But again, it speaks to the culture here and in the United States compared to other countries where, home birth is a piece of their healthcare, and it's not even, nobody bats an eye about it, but it's a little different here.
Yeah.
Another awesome, statistic that I always like to share is that there is the number, we always wonder like what happens in a transfer, like why are people transferring?
Yeah.
The number one reason for a transfer isn't even an emergency. It's usually a first-time mom who just by unlucky hand that she was dealt a very long labor, and she's exhausted and needs the tools of the hospital to either help her labor progress or get her some pain relief or some rest. Or, she goes on to have a natural, a vaginal birth and like healthy mom and healthy baby still at the end of that, even though there was a transfer. So all of that is not even an emergency. And that's the most common reason for a transfer. So again, speaks to how safe home birth actually is. And these are the things that I love that I'm so excited to be here to be able to like get this information out there to people, because people then might realize how much more of this is actually an option for people.
Absolutely. And that's, I think, what you and I talk about when we co-manage or share mamas is a lot of the time it's just a long labor, first time mama, and she just needs a little support, and that's what our medical system's here for, right? Yeah, in those scenarios, that's why they're so important.
And that's what I always like to tell families, hey, if we don't need the tools of the hospital, great, but if we do, thank goodness they're there.
Absolutely.
And that's why we transfer, so we can use those things. And, nobody wants, especially if you're planning a home birth, nobody wants to have to go to the hospital to get Pitocin or an epidural and things like that. That's why you're home. But I always like to share with people, sometimes those tools at the hospital could be the difference between a vaginal birth and a C-section. So like being able to adjust our plan also is a really important piece of home birth and that sort of thing, and having realistic, times of like, okay, we weren't at that point, but now we are, and now we have to, with the information in front of us, make a new choice, a new decision, that's going to be the safest thing for everybody.
Absolutely. I mean, that's part of the unpredictability of birth is you're surrendering to process. And that's part of the beauty of it.
Yes,
so,
there is a lot of surrendering and acceptance that goes on with labor, pregnancy, birth, postpartum, raising children, all of it.
It's the motherhood transition.
Yes, absolutely.
It's not called that for nothing.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, that's amazing information to learn. There. Do you have any thoughts on how like local practitioners and parents can collaborate to create better birth outcomes, and especially if, let's say, a couple or choosing a home birth? Have you seen things where maybe one person's not necessarily 100% about it and that significantly impacts outcome?
I would say usually sometimes there are some families, that like maybe their family members, again, are operating under the notion and the cultural experience that like birth is unsafe and dangerous and scary. And so sometimes that can be tricky for like a pregnant family who's like really wanting this option to feel good about it. Some families who don't even tell families that their own immediate families, like parents and grandparents, that they're actually having a home birth. They just let people assume that they're having the birth at the hospital and then don't tell them until the baby's born, because they don't want that energy to impact like their own nervousness or trust in their bodies and all those sorts of things. But yeah, as far as like, partnering with other healthcare practitioners in the healthcare system and, barriers like in there, honestly, I feel like, again, everybody wants a healthy mom and healthy baby, and we're all coming to the table with the same thing and maybe different, benefits that we can bring to the table. But I think a lot of times families and healthcare practitioners are sort of like at odds, isn't even necessarily because the two parties can't come to an agreement about things. I think our healthcare system is set up to create barriers. So one of the biggest things that I see, and I felt when I was a nurse practitioner especially, is when you have really short appointment times, you don't get to have that relationship with your client where they get to know you and you get to know them. If they know you and trust you and you have conversations about the pros and cons of options, and it sounds like you are interested in hearing their side and they're interested in receiving the information. And it's really hard to accomplish that sort of a relationship when insurance companies are dictating, we have to see 25, 30 people a day to keep our doors open. It's impossible for healthcare practitioners to even feel good about the care that we're giving. And it's hard for consumers to feel good about the care they're receiving. And I think that's really where the biggest disconnect comes, is not having the opportunity to build relationships with families. Sometimes it takes 5 minutes, 10 minutes of somebody's time and a conversation between a practitioner and a client to develop trust and also be able to hear each other out and understand each other, and some buy-in from your client. Like you really, really want them to choose a good choice, that's going to be safe for them. But if you don't have the time to like talk about the evidence and, hey, this is what we've learned about, the pros and cons of the choices you had before you.
Yeah.
It's really like a lot of times people don't have the time to ask those questions. It's really hard to be connected to your client and your patient, and to be able to have a good relationship going forward, and that sort of thing. So I think that's the biggest thing that I see. And again, not really a practitioner issue, not really a client, a family issue. It's really just the way our healthcare system is set up currently, and some of that's getting better. But
well, I know,
long road.
Hopefully, as more people educate themselves and become more aware, and it'll change.
And our healthcare system has changed dramatically. When you look at decades ago, evidence and evidence-based practice was not really a thing. Providers, we just didn't have the research studies out there, and so a lot of us, the older we got, the better we got, because we were able to rely on our gut, and other practitioners and networking of like how people handle this or that, and so it was very much like a provider feeding their people, their clients, the information, and so clients were very much like needing to accept everything that their provider said. But with the advent of information out there so readily, like on the internet and whatnot, and there's pros and cons to that, of course, that people are way more informed. And so that creates a situation where clients are now wanting to be active participants in their care. And so again, with that disconnect is sometimes if you have a practitioner who very much wants to be the one to give the information and the clients are trying to have a relationship, sometimes that can be a disconnect, and people really come to the table, consumers are coming to the table wanting to have that, reciprocal relationship of like give and take, and like, I want to hear your opinion, but I also want the power to be able to make my choices.
It comes back to autonomy, and like the provider is the person with the knowledge in that department and the ability to support them, but in the least biased way possible is the goal, right?
Absolutely.
As like a resource for them.
And true informed choice involves unbiased information, and we are historically not great at giving. I mean,
we're human, right?
Yeah, exactly. We do. We have our own personal feelings about things on top of the evidence that we know, and so it's hard. Again, we're human, not to bring some of that to the table. It's effort to not do that and be really conscious of, am I trying to sway somebody one way or the other, or am I really just trying to put the information out there and do the best I can to help them see like what the best choice might be, the healthiest choice might be, but without actually putting my own twist on it to force that direction.
Absolutely. And like you said, the healthcare system unfortunately kind of puts providers in a corner in that scenario.
Absolutely. We just don't have the time to give that kind of care that most of us we came to here to become providers, because we care about people and we want people to be healthy and all that. And so there's barriers that kind of prevent us from being able to fully practice the way we'd like to and the way we know how. And so mostly our healthcare system. And
now you're in private practice, right? So you're kind of able to control your patient interactions, how much time you spend with each other, and all that kind of stuff, which is adds another unique approach as well as being a home birth midwife. You're also providing that intimate care, even just verbally when you're communicating with them.
And there's so much front loading of information during appointments as well, because I have that time. I block an hour for each client for appointments. For new client appointments, I block about 2 hours. Do I need all of that all the time? Not necessarily, but at least I have it, for people who need it. And I feel so blessed to be able to have that time, but I did not have that when I was in, as a midwife practicing in the mainstream setting, or as a nurse practitioner practicing in the mainstream setting. It just wasn't possible with the way our healthcare system is set up.
Yeah, absolutely. And we see that everywhere too, which is hard. As far as guidance for parents, what do you feel like is some good guidance as a home birth midwife for parents potentially seeking out that avenue of birth?
So probably the evidence or the guidance I would give, it would be good for anybody, but like truly like being healthy. And that does not just mean physically, it means, body, mind, and spirit.
Absolutely.
And that I can't say, and I truly could go on and on about that, about how important it is to, eat a good diet, a well-balanced diet, and to also make sure that you're getting exercise. And again, this isn't just about our bodies, it's also about our spirit and our emotions. There's actually another, quote of a research study that I love is they compared people who were taking like Zoloft and Prozac, medications like that for depression and anxiety. Yep. Mm-hmm. They compared people in that category to people who they had them walk for 30 minutes, 3 times a week in nature. Mm-hmm. And they compared to see how well people's anxiety and depression was managed. People who went for walks did equal to or better than people on medications. So it speaks to how much we need to, again, nourish our souls in certain ways. And we all have things that fill our cup, but I don't think we're such an active, not physically, but like just a busy culture. Mm-hmm. And life is moving really fast and it's really hard to fill our cups. And I think everything kind of starts from there. We're also starting to realize the relationship between stress that leads to inflammation, that leads to chronic disease. And really that might be just as good, if not better, than getting exercise and eating a good diet. I mean, you need all of them truly, but that if you can start with like really filling your cup and living an intentional, conscious life, making choices of what do we want? What do we want this dynamic of our family to look like? Do we want to have family dinners? Do we want to have a game night? Do we want to go to church? Do we want to, have, or do we want it to just be flying by the seat of our pants? Sometimes
some people do well that way.
Right, exactly. Some people do fantastic like that, and other people are like, just kind of running around and feeling like they can't keep up. And that creates so much like stress and people getting down on themselves about, what are they actually, able to do? And they feel like they can't do it all. And that's a lot for a human, critter to be able to, manage and, feel good or not good about, So that's probably the number one thing I would say is just like a healthy lifestyle. And what does that actually mean and look like? And we could get into that like crazy, but on the surface, good diet, good rest, good, intentional life and nourishing your heart as well as your body. But yeah, specifically to anybody in a birthing woman's body, I would say not just, all those things I mentioned, but, the education of yourself and like knowing what kind of things you want for your, choices and taking the time to investigate those options, but also all of the sister services, chiropractor, pelvic floor PT, planning on, even if you wanted an epidural in a hospital, some hypnobirthing and Bradley method and some things like that. Yeah, to really help you feel empowered by your labor versus be up by your labor. We can look at contractions as, something that's happening to us, but if we're able to change our perspective of like, my body is doing what it's supposed to do. My body is doing the right thing. It's working. Like, look at me go,
How amazing is this?
Yeah. Like people feel way more empowered when they can flip that switch in their brain to that sort of a perspective versus this is painful, this is awful, this is scary. And there's so many tools out there now to help people be able to do that. And I think it's equally important for no matter where you're planning on having your baby. But obviously, we don't have the luxury of epidurals and meds and stuff at home. So, being really good with those sorts of natural things to get you through your labor is going to be, practicing that while you're pregnant is going to be awesome and really help you through.
Well, and I've heard too, like transition in birth, that really tests, like you said, your heart and your soul, because if you're not fully committed to the transition, those are areas where women can get stuck, and that's what leads to the prolonged labors and then potentially the transfers and stuff. So I think, like you said, like regulation, nervous system regulation, but also like hypnobirthing is incredible because, like you said, our bodies are designed to do this. It may be pain, but it's pain with a purpose.
Exactly.
And the coolest end goal ever.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So,
And totally all like sitting, like getting out, like, again, our modern life and lifestyle is really not conducive to health in many ways. But even back to just like if we're talking about the body physically, like I recommend a lot of, and most of us midwives do recommend, our clients see a pelvic floor, PT specialist. And there's now research to support that. In other cultures like France, they are now giving postpartum women a certain number of visits with a pelvic floor specialist after they have the baby.
It's amazing.
Yeah, because it just logically makes sense. Like, our bodies have gone through so much to have this baby. Our center of gravity shifts, our spine shifts, so many shifting of the pelvis. So many women are going into a deficit with a second baby or a third baby because of the shifting of their bodies, never kind of maybe getting back in realignment or in really toned, good shape to prepare them for the next baby. And so, pelvic floor PT during pregnancy, after pregnancy, amazing. Same thing too. And you could speak to the statistics on this better than I could, but chiropractors also increase the odds of a vaginal birth, increase the odds of a smooth birth and a very smoothly progressing birth and a less uncomfortable birth. Baby being in an optimal position, all of those things can really, they make a huge difference. And those are things that I like to recommend too.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's aiding in the postpartum recovery, not only physically, but a lot of hormonal changes and shifts happen in that period as well, to help your body better regulate. Is never a bad thing.
Exactly. Yes, absolutely.
Mineral depletion and stuff too from pregnancy and postpartum. Like you were saying, like recovery from, one birth to another birth and like allowing your body to heal. Because I've seen so many statistics on social media, really. It's like it takes up to 2 years for your body like to heal completely.
Absolutely.
And not just like the physical wound from the placenta in your uterus, like till restoring minerals and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, pregnancy spacing is something also that a lot of us, midwives and, practitioners, again, hospital or home, but I'm really big on, you talk to any of my clients, we'll talk about pregnancy spacing, postpartum, big time, because, you want to be a healthy, person, replenish all of your nutrients and all that sort of stuff, especially if you've been breastfeeding and you plan on breastfeeding in the future and you're planning on getting pregnant soon, that 18 months plus, like you were saying, up to 2 years, can take a while for you to, replenish all of your nutrient stores and mineral stores from the first pregnancy to be healthy and ready to go for the next pregnancy. So, and people tend to feel better when they have, that little bit of time, like your energy is back, your stamina is back. And then of course, your obviously your nutrients and stuff are back too.
Yeah, absolutely. And it probably allows you to show up better as a parent potentially
100%.
To your current child and your potential future child.
Yeah, you can't pour from an empty cup. You have nothing to give yourself or others, So yeah, definitely making sure that we're all not so great at self-care because of our fast-paced lifestyle, and so learning to not feel guilty about like the things we need to do to feel good is really important to that's a thing to navigate. And it comes, I think, maybe with age or a little bit, like you at some point realize I can't give 100% in every single area if I'm depleted, and again, that's not just physically, it's emotionally, mentally, spiritually, all of the things, so that's learning, what do I need to feel full and brimming over so I have that surplus of love and energy and whatever to give others. Starts with giving to you.
Absolutely, 100%. We're stopping that conversation right now. That was go. It's true. It's so true. Trends and shifts in trends. Do you see any, the potential or the opening for there to be change in the current like healthcare system, especially in like prenatal care, postpartum care, with women's health in general too?
Yeah. So I feel like, again, like circling back, it's been a very slow progression, but we already have seen that, again, going from like the only option of place to get information was from your provider many decades ago. Now people have information and they're showing up wanting to be active participants in their healthcare. So that's a huge change and, a great change. And they're also now, I think one of the biggest things that I'm tending to see right now is how many practitioners are actually leaving the mainstream healthcare system to either get an entirely different career, which is heartbreaking, or open their own practice. And, a lot of them, because of our experiences, like what I had when I was a nurse practitioner and such, is they don't want to work with insurance companies because of the dictating that insurance companies do on your time and, all sorts of things. And that's a crazy long conversation we could get into, but there's so many ways that the mainstream healthcare system, again, like all the barriers I had mentioned a minute ago, that come in the way of you trying to have a good relationship with the consumers of healthcare and your patients and whatnot. I think seeing that trend of not only are practitioners wanting to leave the mainstream, but also clients are wanting to leave the mainstream for the same reasons that the practitioners don't want to be there. They want the same things we want, and I think it's very slow, but we are kind of coming together. Yep. And I think our healthcare system is changing a little bit. It's gonna have no choice but to accommodate that. It could take maybe 3 more decades. I don't know, but we are probably going to be forced to do something different than what we're doing, because what we're doing, it's very clearly not sustainable.
And it's not giving the consumer the best care possible, and therefore it's leaving the providers feeling like their cup isn't full in the professional aspect.
Absolutely. Yeah. For example, I think the average, lifespan of a career of a midwife in a hospital is like, 7-8 years maybe. I know it's less than 10. If I look out there and I see all the home birth midwives that I know, 10 years is like the minimum some of them have been doing what they do, because we have the ability to give care in the way that we want to and provide really good care that makes us feel good about what we're doing. You have much more of that opportunity when you have your own practice.
No, absolutely. I can relate to that as well. And it's really special to be able to touch people's lives in such a personal way.
Yep.
And it carries throughout their life, so it's definitely, it's like a little footprint on the heart.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, that's why we're all here. That's why we all became practitioners of healthcare in some shape or form, is because we care about people. And when the ability to care about people is taken from us because we have all of these, criteria that we have to meet and I's and T's we have to dot, it becomes a lot less satisfying for us. And it's also very clearly not very satisfying for our clients either. And so we all want the same things.
Absolutely. That was very well said. Very, very well said. And then I feel like we actually already touched about our last question, which was like evidence-based stuff. So I would like to ask you a little bit how you chose your Crossroads Midwifery and how that came about in the aspect of, why Crossroads?
Oh, okay. So my practice is located in Lafayette, which is where Route 81 and 20 intersect, and it's considered the crossroads of New York State. So physically Crossroads, but also Crossroads very much so because of healthcare, not just pregnancy, but also just a person in the world. We all come up with things that happen to us, like our bodies and whatever. And sometimes we are at a crossroads of, am I going to, eat that donut? Or am I going, because I just got diagnosed with prediabetes. What am I going to do now? How do I navigate this? What do I do? Health, we all come up with so many crossroads that we have to navigate in life. And just, again, spiritually and emotionally, there are so many crossroads in our lives that we all have to face. And so, so there's the other piece of crossroads.
That is beautiful. I love that.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's well said. And so if anyone wants to find you, how do they find you?
Well, I'm terrible with social media. My website is being worked on. So eventually all that will be easier. But I do have a Facebook page that doesn't have a whole lot on it. But you can at least get a little information about me there and where my practice is located and some of the assistants that I work with, which I didn't say much about them, but all of my assistants are amazing and function as nurses do in the hospital setting. They come to births with me and they get to meet my clients and we all work together, so I have a great relationship with all my assistants. So you get to learn who they are. Eventually I'd love to have pictures of babies and stuff that are on there and I haven't gotten around to it. But yeah, so my page and my business name is Crossroads Midwifery and Family Wellness, and you can find me on Facebook.
Beautiful. Amazing. Thank you so much for coming and chatting.
Thank you so much
with
for
us.
having me. This was so fun. This was great.
I'm so excited to share all these nuggets.
Thank you.
Of course. I feel like we crushed the timing on that.